at it again here in San Diego at the lovely, lovely Emerald Conference. I am your co-host, Destiny Blanco.
Well, you're the host now.
Well, introduction, yeah, okay.
Okay, co-host, I guess. So I'm Dimitri Downing, but we know she's Destiny Blanco, and we are here. This is the first time we reversed it. Usually I'm the one who does the intro. And we're at the Emerald Conference, which we like to refer to as the Emerald Scientific Conference, interviewing some of the fascinating individuals who are involved in the cutting-edge thinking, science behind the cannabis plant and the cannabis industry. And we are here in lovely San Diego, and this is probably our first camera shot of the bay.
Beautiful view.
So behind this curtain is actually that bay, which you can see if you open the curtain. And somehow we got a camera shot out there, which is very, very interesting. This is the first one. So Mark, you are actually like a lucky charm, because that's pretty impressive what we have out there. We have a camera outside for you.
Magically delicious.
Pretty cool.
Woo!
So we're here with Mark Lewis, and we're talking phytofacts, and we're talking the cannabis industry, and there's a bird jumping around over there. Not sure how it got in. You see that?
It is inside.
There is a bird inside.
The door's propped open.
So Mark, your cannabis journey, and we'll basically start with, you can start, this is Unshackled, so we don't mind talking OG, legal activity, whether it's consumption, transportation.
Give us the real...
I always start by saying I'm an ex-prosecutor and I shipped drugs illegally, cannabis, from Tucson to Boston while I was at Boston University. There's nothing they can do about it now. I prosecuted afterwards. I really don't care. It is what it is. That's Unshackled. So we want to hear about your cannabis journey and how it led you here to today.
I'm not going to fall for that entrapment.
Yeah.
Plead the fifth on that one.
Admit nothing. Right.
Smart man.
The road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. So that's kind of my story. I grew up in Indiana, so I'm a Hoosier. And about 1992, Dr. Dre's album, The Chronic, dropped. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, it was all over the TV because that was the internet back then.
And you were in high school?
I was in high school.
Indiana Hoosier, 92.
Yeah, and I saw people smoking weed, talking about weed. Mm-hmm. And, it'd been in my life. My mom grew up in French Lick, and they all
get a little closer here. There you go. Thanks.
Got a little closer. Always growing weed in my family, right? Drying it in the oven, weird stuff like that in Indiana. And in 1994, I went to IU Bloomington, and little did I know, but I've scored my first kind bud, and it was a Hawaiian bag seed, right? Grew the plants. It was amazing. That was the start of my seed and clone collection. A couple years later, I go to another school and start doing research, and I find out that IU Bloomington has one of two DEA permits to cultivate cannabis.
Really?
Nice.
And David Watson had sent 157 landrace seed accessions there.
Mm-hmm.
And David Watson is Sam the Skunk Man. He kind of started a lot of this seed and hemp industry. He bred the VIR strains for hemp, USO 31, Super Skunk, Early Girl, Durban Poison. So there was a lot of good genetics there, and I never really believed that they were being grown there, but I was getting clones and seeds, and they all smelled different, and they were all great. Mm-hmm. So being a collector, I hoarded, and in '96 I went to Amsterdam for the first time.
1996.
Yes, and I do like I'll go ahead and admit, in my sock, on both sides, I had weed and seed.
That's okay. They can't do anything about it. They can't touch you
but
now.
But I have video proof of it.
They can't touch it. It's all unshackled. It's like confessions of OG pot.
Did it happen or did it
entrepreneurs.
happen?
Oh, it happened. And what was crazy was I went there with one of my friends who's 6'3", big dude, always wore sunglasses, tattooed in high school, that kind of guy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we were coming back in through customs, and they open our bags, right? And in the bag is like Hard Rock Cafe Amsterdam, Cincy Seeds, and they just start ripping through it, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. But
sitting there like...
It was amazing. That whole trip through Amsterdam, though, we had one cabbie, and he just hooked us up, took us everywhere. It was pretty awesome. And then in '98, I went to Jamaica.
So, just quickly, because in 1990, 1995, I was in Boston University, and there's a massive, from San Diego and Tucson, a lot of Mexican weed was coming across up to Boston, and that's where everybody was like shipping it, and buying and selling it. Indiana, you were growing your own. You guys weren't getting in, collecting any of that Mexican weed?
So I left out the entrepreneurial side. This is
Yeah,
more
no,
the
we talk-
R&D side. On the entrepreneurial side, yeah, that we're getting packs of commercial downtown brown Mexican.
From Mexico, yeah.
Yeah, and they were between 700 and 800 a pound back then.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're coming from Brownsville, from what I understand. I was never part of that stuff.
Okay. I don't want to talk. I was.
And well,
So.
then like after a year of all the brown and red, and then came the green, but it was all stemmy,
Yeah,
But
lots of
people
stems.
wanted the green because we called it the Stemmy Stevens.
Yeah.
We got that Stemmy Stevens. I don't want that brown anymore,
Yeah.
And we did all the tricks back then,
Yeah.
orange peels, chocolate, whatever, to get it to smell differently. Sometimes they'd come in a tire. You had to cut the tire open. Weird
Yeah,
stuff.
we just fucked around
Oh,
a little
cool.
bit. We would put it in boxes and label it for lighting products and ship it to a big performance center out that I worked at back at Boston University. And it was like just play 4 pounds, 8 pounds, whatever, 30, 40 times. And then I was like, this is going to lead somewhere negatively. And I moved away from that, whatever. But I had friends who kept doing it, and they were doing like 128-pound FedEx shipments in 2 big boxes overnight. I was like, what is crazy? And eventually I graduated and moved on. One of them ended up doing a federal sentence of like 5 years.
FedEx to get
Yeah,
you federal.
because eventually he got caught.
What I was taught was that the USPS can't search your packages
Yeah.
because of, but FedEx can, UPS can, and they were always like, never do FedEx. But
Yeah.
yeah, the interesting story is where I got the kind bud actually was a friend, and he was my hookup for the commercial as well. And one Christmas break, he wasn't around. So I went to the dude's house and just knocked on the door, I was like, hey. He's like, who are you? I was like, well, I usually split the pound with him. And he's like, you think you can handle it? I was like, yeah. He gave me a pound. I came back 1 week later. He gave me 3 pounds. I came back a week later. It was 10. And then we were off to the
Okay.
races, right? It was like, I feel like when I watch Blow, that first part of the movie before,
Yeah.
bad, that was that time in life where it was just like boom, boom, boom. But
So
I really didn't-
1998.
no, that was in the earlier 90s. In 98, I was already at Rose Holman, and I already had discovered kind bud, and 35 millimeter case was the only way to keep it from stinking, all that stuff.
Mhm.
And we had done 4-H, so we had always collected seed and always grown flower and all that stuff. So by 98, I was on the genetics hunt. So in 96, I was on the genetics hunt as well. Did the Amsterdam thing. 98, went to Jamaica. And in Jamaica, I went from farm to farm to farm. Some farms were up on the hillside, some were in the plains, and the ones that were really cool, they were in the riverbed, and they had furrowed up like strawberry furrows, rows and furrows. And when the tide would come in, the fresh water would flood up the furrows, and that was the best weed. And that's when I learned that you don't want to grow cannabis in arid or hot areas. You want it to be like a lot of redshift and a lot of moisture, because that's where they evolved. But by 2000, I'd graduated, been growing in the cornfields every year, and then went to PhD work in chemistry, natural products, had access to HPLCs, so I could look at what was in my weed. And I noticed that there's different smells and different molecules that corresponded to them. Kind of took a hiatus to get my degree work done. Grew in my garage the entire time. Got great video of that too.
Why'd you stop growing in the cornfields?
Because I moved to live next door to my father.
So you no longer had access to cornfields.
Right.
Okay. I'm
Then
thinking
it's
like
his
Field of
garage.
Dreams and Kevin Costner
it's not
stuff
just
here.
corn. Soybean is actually better because
Yeah.
you can put the pots out in the soybean, and then the plant just kind of grows up above the beans, and it's like perfect. The corn, you actually have to pull rows out.
Yeah,
It's a lot more work.
that's okay. I saw the movie.
Yeah. And then next door to my dad, I had a 2-car garage, and I
Right.
just built a false wall and had to grow, and I grew there all through my graduate work
In Indiana.
in Indiana, next door to my dad, and he had no idea until the last year.
Yeah.
So
He had no
and
idea.
He'd come
He was-
over, he'd shoot the shit, and
He couldn't smell it.
No.
So you did your graduate work in
Biochemistry.
biochemistry.
Nice.
Yeah, so I isolated natural products and tried to figure out where they bound on DNA, and then tried to design molecules to bind to DNA as anti-cancer therapies.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very familiar with the central dogma of molecular biology, DNA, RNA, protein paradigm. So then I moved out to California, and right before I moved, my friend was
What
like,
year did you move out here?
07.
Oh, 2007, yeah.
That's when I graduated. And one of my friends was like, oh, out there, You just put a piece of paper on your wall and you can grow weed. And I was like, bullshit. And when the dude at IU was like, oh, we grow this weed in the greenhouse, I was like, oh, bullshit. So I get out to California, and just like the whole weed in the greenhouse thing in IU, I'm on my back porch like, is that weed?
No way.
Yeah. And I walk around the neighborhood to the dude's house. I'm like, hey, you got weed in your backyard? And he's like, I'm like, no. I just want to know how you do that. And he's like, oh, I got this piece of paper on the wall. And I was just like, oh, shit, that's real?
Like a caregiver license almost?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was the
Just
early days of California medicinal marijuana.
Prop 215.
Yeah.
215.
96 through, when did California legalize? 2016, right?
18, I think, is when they started implementing, but...
Yeah, but the passed in 2016, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a long time. It's
It
20
is.
years in medicinal marijuana California had. But sorry, go ahead.
No, and it's the Wild Wild West. So, and I was, as soon as I figured that out, I started networking everywhere.
Yeah,
I went to this hemp con, and I remember seeing Robert Clark there. He's,
yeah.
a notable author, ethnobotanist, all that stuff. And I'm like, hey, Rob.
Different Robert Clark. There's one that hangs out in Arizona.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but yeah.
This Robert Clark is the one who worked with David Watson and Ethan Rusto.
Yeah.
On the
He's like the OG California, Colorado guys.
Yeah. California, him and Mel Frank.
Is it California? Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I'm like, hey, Rob. And he's like, I was like, your book's awesome. I was like, I'm a PhD chemist. He's like, yeah. I was like, I'm going to write a book too. And he's just like, oh, you're like the 50th person who's told me that.
Yeah.
Good luck, kid. And that was hilarious and insightful to me, because now I meet all these people out here. They're like, oh, yeah, we're breeders too. We have an R&D program. And I'm just like, oh, you guys don't even know what you're doing. Like, come on now. This is real world science, and you got to embrace it.
Right. Like, are they actually breeders, Because there's a whole lot that goes into it, not just growing the plant.
She grows too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a home grower.
It's tough, because you look. So fast forward, start my laboratory, because I have access to all the OG genetics, and I've been, growing my own and, trying to figure out different traits. Start working with laboratories, and I realized that their testing's all kind of wonky. So I started a business based on validating other laboratories' test results for dispensaries and getting their money refunded to them if the results are bad, or the laboratories aren't doing what they should do ethically.
Right.
It worked out really well. Got my laboratory going.
You got a fact checker.
Yeah, exactly. But legit. And then we start screening all these genetics. I mean, mines, went through the Emerald Triangle, collecting everywhere, just bioprospecting and sorting everything into categories based on aroma and flavor, which are the terpenes, right? And we published that for the California land races before any of the compliance laboratories did, because we were focused on aroma and smell. We knew that if you could get the right aroma and smell and couple it with the right cannabinoid profile, you could then tailor effects. Because, high THC is high THC, but there's a lot of folks out there that would like to have a different experience.
Right, the CBG, CBGA.
All that stuff. And you remember back in 2012 or 13, how you did intake at a dispensary, right? People just line up at the door with duffel bags and dirty fingernails, and they're like, how much you give me for it?
Yeah.
And
well, we have, every state's different, but yeah.
Oh, well, California.
California style,
It would be out the door. Like, there'd be 50 people there on intake day, like everything you can imagine, right? And they'd, smell, and I'd get sick every time. And the people who own the stores versus the people who manage the stores, there was this conflict, because the people who own the stores wondered why the margins weren't higher on certain items, and the managers were paying X amount of dollars for this one but not that one. Turns out that the managers pay more to their boyfriend who's growing OG than someone who's growing a killer OG. Right. So they were like,
that's twisted.
How can we get a way to analyze quality?
Yeah.
So we start talking about the COAs that the laboratories are coming down. And this really great dispensary owner, her name's Andre Special. She has one of the best dispensaries. She's one of the most insightful dispensary owners. She was like, we need something that's easy.
What year was this?
Probably 2014.
Okay.
So we sought out to not only make something easy, but something that could be a quality, quick at a glance quality control, but also tell us about the aroma and flavor, which was, hadn't been thought of yet in cannabis. They were still color coding the cannabinoids.
Right.
And when you breed a bunch of different things, you want to be able to see all the differences really quickly. If you're looking at lines of data, as you know, it's hard to parse through. So this is what we came up with, was a phytofax. And basically we color code the terpenes intuitively here. so that the limonene are yellow and the pinene are green and the linelules are lavender. But more importantly, the warm tones correspond with terpenoids that inherit with sativa landraces, and the cool tones are terpenes that inherit with indica type landraces. So this gives you the chemical version of the cultural indica sativa hybrid situation, trying to cross that chasm between science and
This
culture.
is so interesting.
So for instance, and the top part shows you cannabinoids and terpenoids, right? And the scale is set to 30%. So if both these bars are pegged, you know it's fire, right? You got 30% cannabis, 3% terps. That's going to be some oily goodness. And then you got, down here, the different cannabinoids. But we use this phytoprint area, which is the fingerprint of the essential oil for each given chemovar, to generate a aroma and flavor pie chart, spider chart, and a terpene entourage pie chart. So basically, you have all these sales tools that can help throughout the entire supply chain, right? So in our world, we think mass farming, farm sending product to central processing center.
Yeah.
How do you sort the trim if you have 50 strain names? You can't, because you don't know what the terp profiles of a strain name. But we put the top 3 terpenes at the top in this class system. So you can sort all of your products in your supply chain by chemistry. So when you do your extractions, you have nice, consistent extraction streams. Then when you're at the store, say you want this type 2 of, this is an enhanced flower. This is a 1-to-1, which is my favorite type of herb.
I like those too.
But you're like, limonene. And you're like, hey, I want that one. And the bud tender's like, I don't know. Oh, it's yellow. Here's another yellow one. You'll probably like this one. Since you can't open a jar in a dispensary anymore, you need to be able to see the smell. And that's what these are providing. So the red ones and the blue one, that's a Jack Herrera nose right there. So if someone came in and said, hey, I want that Jack, and they're like, oh, we're out of Jack, but we do have these other red ones.
Dan's been on our podcast. Dan Herrera. Jackson.
Oh, okay. That did not register, sorry. And then, like, for instance, this one, pinene dominant, beta caryophyllene secondary, this doesn't exist in the marketplace. This is unique. And we work with one of the, if not the most sophisticated breeder in cannabis. Not only are they breeding for all these unique chemistries, but also upregulating to, that's 3.3% terps. That's unheard of. They have 5% terps, they have 30% cannabis and all that stuff, but they also breed for agronomic traits like resistance, morphology of the flower. So their rosin producers, they want a flower that washes well in ice water, so they get a high yield and they can make money. So they breed things that have a certain trichome size so that they can get a 6, 7, 8% yielder in the wash. They also work with flower producers and want tight nugs that are 30% plus. They do that. You want something that can grow in water all year round, fusarium resistance, they work on that. And then if they get those traits, the washer wants a pinene that washes well, then they breed those chemical traits into the physical trait. So now they have a pinene, unique new product category flavor in rosin. So these guys have been doing it for a long time, and they started with a really great collection. So
how cool.
So all this expertise, all this knowledge, what exactly is Phytovax? Is you guys are based in California, and tell us about the business model.
Oh, well, Christian really works on the business model. I'm more like the visionary. But behind this, we actually have a fully functional track and trace software that's been built to sort all of these things by chemistry for that exact reason. And we have clients that use that specifically. But ideally, what would happen is this is probably the most useful for the store and the bud tender and the education of the consumer, which in our world of what's the highest THC percentage, that's what I want to buy. That's a bad model, especially with the laboratory fraud.
Right.
Because, my laboratory, what we've done before is several times ground up flour, send it to a dozen different laboratories and compare their results with ours, right? Never have the results came back less than ours. They've always been more, and sometimes 2x more. So, we've actually been, we actually were hired by a distribution company to find the highest testing laboratory for them, right? So you have
That's manipulative, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
just keep testing till you get a high percentage. And is that possible? Do you test it one time and you test another time, you get something different?
not at the same laboratory, but if you find a laboratory that inflates the numbers or skewed
Oh,
their
God.
calibration curve just right, and that's
Yeah.
the game right now. I mean, you saw the RICO laws in Arkansas and the lawsuit against not Stizzy, but
Jeter.
Yeah. But that's an interesting thing because they're trying to stay alive. But I think the majority of fraud is happening actually at the distribution site because of this shopping phenomenon, right?
Right.
And once you find a batch that tests 30, the state nor the inspectors care. You can have this one batch that tests 30, get 50 pounds at 30, bring in another, put that label on another set of 50 pounds and just keep retesting that same 30%er and sending it out the door. So then you have a consumer who's buying a 30%er that's really 15%. And they're like, man, this is the best weed I've ever smoked. And then they buy a legit 30%er and they have like a little panic attack, you know?
Yeah.
And they have a bad experience. So to normalize this market and to grow it, we need to be getting the people, the other 90% who don't use daily, right?
Right.
And the way to do that is to educate. And the way to educate is to start with a vocabulary that we can talk about the products with. And we believe that this is like the alphabet to the vocabulary that we can start to talk about how to sell things. Like,
Right.
oh, you want a 30%er? What terp profile you want? What flavor you want?
Exactly.
No,
Like you said, the warm, creates the indica or sativa kind of vibes. Well,
And the best
the
part,
terpenes.
something a lot of people don't realize because they haven't done the research, is that when you have all THC and it's high THC, that's the main driving pharmacological factor, right? But as soon as you start adding a little CBD, it cuts the edge off the THC just enough that the terpene entourage becomes more prevalent. So then you can start having tailored, unique medicines or products for people who, if you want to watch a movie, is different than if you want to have sex, is different than if you want to go to the gym, is different than if you want to just get blasted, right? Get weird and feel weird, So hopefully this sets a new paradigm for us to discuss the products. Since you can't smell it, you need to be able to see the smell, and this really helps with that.
So when did you come up with this model?
2013.
Right. And have you been
and
finding?
we've applied it to culinary herbs, hops, all not just cannabis, but cannabis is where it seems to be the most needed right now.
Right.
The terpenes.
Have you been getting good reception from your cannabis industry compadres?
Everyone who sees it loves it, to be honest with you. And Dr. Ethan Russo, when he saw it, he was hooked, and he came to help work it. You know Dr. Ethan Russo?
Don't think so.
He's
Sounds
one
familiar.
of the first researchers that looked into the combinations of THC and CBD. He worked for GW Pharma, as well as wrote papers about how terpenes have effect.
He's the doctor behind GW Pharma?
One of them, yeah.
One of them, yeah. Okay, excellent.
Yeah, but great guy, great work.
No, excellent. And what about nationwide, international? Like you guys, different states?
So we recently integrated with Confident Cannabis, which is a laboratory LIMS system, and it is now available to over half of the compliance testing laboratories in the United States. So this just happened recently, and we're hoping to get a push and get some more widespread adoption because we need standards. And if you go to some of the MSO websites, they might have some of the terpenes, but they're color coded differently or whatever. And it's like we need to all
be on the same page. Yeah. So is that something that you guys kind of offer to work with other dispensaries and brands to, educate, tell them, hey guys, these are the proper terpene profiles, and then because the bud tenders are the ones that really need to know this information.
Well, what's really cool is that the California State Fair have a phytofax on their website for every single winner. That was one of the rare competitions that was all chemistry focused.
Right.
So you guys can check out the State Fair website to see the phytofax for the most THC and whatnot, and other groups who, like Alec Dixon from SC Labs, big shout out. He is really great at educating bud tenders and things like that, and we all have to work together on it. Like, we love to educate bud tenders by putting on shows and whatnot and webinars, but at the end of the day, we have to have more adoption so we can educate, right?
Have you worked with the laboratory accreditation associations on this at all? With this,
we're in talks with several, yeah.
Yeah, because I was thinking, those. I was just thinking about those two: the American Association for laboratory accreditation. They were here with us yesterday, and there's like 2 or 3 competing organizations, and they touch a lot of labs.
Yeah.
So that seems like a good group. They're here, like in the building.
There you go.
You're already meeting them because you guys are on that.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, they're very what they're doing, and working with all the labs to make sure that everything is in regulation and compliance is definitely important.
Yeah. We've always set standards. Like I said, we wrote the first validated methodology to test for cannabinoids and terpenoids and made it free for everyone. So that the fledgling new compliance laboratories would have a blueprint to be able to do the chemistry correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the biggest hurdle right there. It's a difficult matrix, and cannabis is like, you talking about the entrepreneurial days. It was like when we were
Those are the easy days.
I meet a bunch of people to, central spot. It's it's Asians, it's black people, it's white people, it's Russians. It doesn't matter, right? The minute we went beyond cannabis to anything that wasn't psychedelic, if you know what I'm saying, it became like weird and fighting and people getting robbed. And it's like, but you go back to cannabis and psychedelics, it's like you don't have that. It's like
plant remedy feeling.
It brings us all together, right?
Yeah.
That's why I like the phytofacts. No
Yes.
matter what color it is, it's all cannabis.
Yeah. No, that's
So
amazing.
what else should people know about PhytoFacts and Mark Lewis? What else are we try to keep these about 20, 30 minutes so that for everybody gets about the same amount of time. What else haven't we touched about in regards to PhytoFacts or Mark Lewis that you want to bring up to the audience?
PhytoFacts is important. Phytoprint's great. We got Molecular Farms who we support. They have the most unique genetics in the world.
Where are they based out of?
Salinas.
Salinas.
They've won the Emerald Cup several times.
How do you? I mean, just real quickly. Everybody always says they have the unique and best genetics, and I know it's not you're saying that. You're saying that about them, which just much more validity. But like, how do people sort through that? How do you sort through the truth of that?
Well, I mean, the data speaks for itself. I've crunched the data for the Emerald Cup competition. I've seen the data from the California State Fair competition. It's all public. And, 80% of sun-grown was beta-caryophyllene dominant. All of the entries, 80% were beta-caryophyllene dominant.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because the only 30%er that the market has unlocked with the communal clone system are all desert lines, caryophyllene dominant cultivars. So to be able to take that caryophyllene dominant cultivar and create something that's pinene dominant and is getting towards 30% cannabis, it requires actual real breeding, data,
Right.
constant analysis, selections. So when I say they're unique, you could tell by the phytoprints. Like I could show you a section of data, and you see 80% is this terp profile, then myrcene, then limonene, and then ocimene and pinene are just 1% or less.
Do you really think that 30%, cannabinoids that actually matters? Those people walk up to the dispensary and they say, "I want that 30% THC." Like, does that?
Like I said, there's all kinds of problems with that. It's super flawed for sure. And I'm more about the sensory experience. So it's like I always say to someone, when it was that downtown brown or whatever, I mean, it didn't taste good, but it got you high, right? But like if you're wanting to have a good experience, there's 5 key characteristics for a great product. One is form factor, which that's easy, right? If it's, if someone wants sliced apples versus an apple, it's easier to eat the sliced apples. The second one is the aroma and the smell. That's super important. The third one is the flavor. Did the aroma and smell translate to the flavor, right? And the fourth one is it smooth or harsh? Did it hit the back of your throat? Did it hurt your lungs? If it smelled good, it tasted good, and it's smooth, and you can put it out and light it back up, and it still tastes good, the only thing left was the experience good?
Right.
So it takes all of those things, and if you don't start with the first one, which is aroma and flavor, none of the rest matter. And if they're all good and it's only 15%, you're still going to have a great experience. But if it's 30% and you accidentally took 8 hits and you're only used to taking 4 or whatever, then you might get a little weird and have to hold on for a minute,
So how do people, and so we got to wrap this up, but how do people get in touch with you? Because I think there'll be people watching this that are at close to your level, be like, I got to talk to that guy. What's the best way to find you?
We got LinkedIn, Napro Research there, Mark Lewis on LinkedIn, and Molecular Farms and Napro Research on Instagram.
Thanks.
Excellent.
At Phytofacts as well.
Yeah.
Facts.
No, I mean, I'm always learning. I come from regulatory lobbying world, so I'm constantly learning about the cannabis industry, and I love these direct one-on-one interactions. It's such a privilege for us to get to learn more from you. So we thank you for being on Beat Unshackled, and I'm sure everybody who's out there watching is like, I feel as if I've learned something, I want to learn more, and then they're going to reach out to you.
Hope so.
And then you should charge them.
It's more about furthering the industry.
Yes, getting the Phytofacts out there.
The dead end, high THC only thing is just killing us right now.
I can see where you're going with this. This is awesome. It's good stuff.
See the smell.
All right. Thanks.
There we go. That was another episode of Meet Unshackled.